My sister left her children on my porch and said she would come back for them when the oldest turned 18. Now she is about to learn what consequences look like. Last Friday, I was working from home in my townhouse in Portland when my doorbell started ringing like someone was leaning on it. I opened the door and found my younger sister, Brianna, standing there with her two kids, Ava, who is 4, and Milo, who is barely 2. Both of them had tiny backpacks and one half-zipped suitcase between them. Brianna was already turning toward her car. I asked what was going on. She smiled like she had done something generous and said, "Great, you're home. I've decided this is best for everyone. You're 35, you live alone, you have that stable insurance job, and the kids need a real home. I'll come get them when Ava is 18. For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. Then she kept talking. I already told them Uncle Daniel is going to be their new dad for a while. Bedtime is 8:30, Milo still needs pull-ups at night, and Ava won't eat anything green unless you hide it in pasta sauce." I just stood there, frozen. Brianna sighed like I was being difficult. "Don't make that face. I'm giving you purpose. You always act like your life is empty because you never got married. Now you get a family without having to do all the dating part." Then she said the part that made my stomach drop. "I need space to focus on my acting career. Kids don't belong around auditions, rehearsals, and late-night shoots. You have a boring adult life. This works perfectly." I finally found my voice and said, "Brianna, you cannot leave your children here." She was already opening her car door. "Of course I can. You're their uncle. Mom and Dad are in Florida, and Dad can barely handle the stairs. Besides, you owe me. I let you crash at my apartment that one winter after college. That was 12 years ago, and I paid for groceries the entire time." Before I could say anything else, she got in the car and drove away. Ava started crying immediately. Milo dropped his stuffed dinosaur on the sidewalk and screamed for his mom. I brought them inside because what else was I supposed to do? Leave 2 toddlers outside in the rain? I gave them apple juice and crackers, turned on cartoons, and called Brianna. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I called 17 times while the kids cried in my living room. Finally, I texted her, "Come back now. This is not okay." She answered 3 minutes later. "Stop being selfish. They need stability." That was it. I stared at the message until my hands stopped shaking. Ava was sitting on the rug with tears on her cheeks. Milo had spilled juice on my couch and was trying to open every cabinet. My quiet house had turned into chaos in less than 15 minutes. At first, I thought about calling the police. Then, I thought about my parents. My mom has heart issues, and my dad is recovering from knee surgery. Then I remembered someone Brianna probably hoped I would forget. Her ex, Marcus. Marcus and I were never close, but after he moved back to Idaho, we kept in touch. Mostly short messages and photos of the kids. He had left Brianna 8 months earlier, after years of working overtime while she chased one big break after another. He told me he missed Ava and Milo so badly it hurt, but every time he talked about going to court, Brianna promised she was changing. She wasn't. So while Ava was curled up with a blanket and Milo was smearing cracker crumbs into my carpet, I called Marcus. He answered. I told him everything. I told him Brianna had shown up, handed me the kids, said she was coming back when Ava turned 18, and disappeared so she could focus on acting. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then Marcus said, "She did what?" I repeated it. His voice changed. "Pack their things. Bring them to Boise. My parents are here. We have room." I hesitated because driving children across state lines sounded insane, but leaving them with me, a man who owned 0 child-proof anything, sounded worse. Marcus was their father. He wanted them now. So I packed everything Brianna had dropped off. It was pathetic. 2 mismatched outfits for Ava, 1 pair of tiny socks, 3 pull-ups for Milo, and a plastic bag with random toys. No medical cards, no favorite blankets, no proper shoes. The drive from Portland to Boise took almost 7 hours because I had to stop constantly. Ava cried until her voice went hoarse. Milo threw up once outside a gas station and then fell asleep holding my sleeve. By the time I pulled into Marcus's parents' driveway, I felt like I had aged 10 years. Marcus was waiting outside with his mother, Helen, and his stepfather, Grant. The second Ava saw Marcus, she screamed, "Daddy!" and ran to him. Milo woke up confused, then reached for him too. Marcus dropped to his knees and held both kids so tightly that I had to look away. Helen took Milo inside to get him cleaned up. Grant carried the suitcase like it weighed something important. Their house was warm and bright, with photos on the walls and toys beside the couch. I realized they had been preparing for this long before Brianna dumped her children on my doorstep. Marcus looked at me and said, "She's not talking her way out of this." That night, Helen made soup while Grant set up 2 little beds in the guest room. Ava kept asking if she was allowed to sleep there. Helen told her she could stay as long as she wanted. Milo ate like he hadn't had a real meal all day. After the kids finally fell asleep, Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table. He told me he had already spoken to a custody lawyer 2 weeks earlier. His parents had pushed him to stop waiting for Brianna to become responsible, but he kept feeling guilty for taking children away from their mother. I told him a mother who leaves toddlers on a porch and drives away has already made that decision herself. The next morning, I woke up on Marcus's parents' couch to the smell of pancakes and coffee. For one confused second, I forgot where I was. Then I heard Milo laughing in the kitchen. He was in a booster seat with syrup on his chin. Ava sat beside him while Helen cut strawberries into tiny pieces. Nobody was yelling, nobody was rushing. The kids looked different already, like their bodies had realized they were safe. Marcus came in from the backyard with his phone in his hand. "I called the lawyer," he said. "We meet Monday." Grant poured me coffee and sat across from me. "You did the right thing bringing them here. Now we make sure they don't get dragged back into a mess." I knew I couldn't avoid Brianna forever. She deserved to know where her children were. So after breakfast, I stepped onto the back porch and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Where are they?" she snapped. "With Marcus in Boise." The screaming started immediately. She called me a kidnapper, a traitor, and a jealous loser. I let her yell before I said, "You left them at my house and told me you would come back when Ava turned 18. That was obviously dramatic," she shouted. "I needed a weekend to clear my head. You ignored 17 calls because you were being hostile." Marcus heard her through the glass door and came outside. I gave him the phone. His voice was low and steady. "Brianna, the kids are staying with me. Any conversation from now on goes through a lawyer." She tried to soften them. Suddenly she was tired. Suddenly she was overwhelmed. Suddenly it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus did not fall for it. "You do not get to abandon them and then rewrite the story," he said. "You left them. I am done pretending this is just you having a hard week." Then he hung up. 2 hours later, police officers knocked on the front door. Brianna had actually called them. Grant answered and invited them in. Marcus explained everything. He showed them my texts with Brianna, and I showed them my call log with 17 attempts. One officer read the messages twice. He looked at Marcus, then at me. "She left them with you and refused to answer?" I nodded. He sighed. "This is not a kidnapping situation. This is a custody and abandonment situation." The other officer called Brianna from the living room. We could hear her yelling through the phone. He told her that her children were with their legal father, that they were safe, and that if she wanted custody change, she needed to go through court. When he hung up, he told Marcus to document everything. After they left, the house went quiet. Helen made coffee. No one drank. Ava and Milo were upstairs napping, unaware that adults were downstairs building a legal wall around them. That evening, Marcus found the folder Brianna had packed. It had old daycare forms, expired insurance cards, and no recent medical records. He called the pediatrician listed on one paper and learned Milo had missed multiple checkups. Ava had not been seen in over a year. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his hands over his face. I had seen him angry before. This was different. This was a father realizing the neglect had been deeper than anyone wanted to believe. The next morning, I woke up on Marcus's parents' couch to the smell of pancakes and coffee. For one confused second, I forgot where I was. Then I heard Milo laughing in the kitchen. He was in a booster seat with syrup on his chin. Ava sat beside him while Helen cut strawberries into tiny pieces. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was rushing. The kids looked different already, like their bodies had realized they were safe. Marcus came in from the backyard with his phone in his hand. "I called the lawyer," he said. "We meet Monday." Grant poured me coffee and sat across from me. "You did the right thing bringing them here. Now we make sure they don't get dragged back into a mess." I knew I couldn't avoid Brianna forever. She deserved to know where her children were. So after breakfast, I stepped onto the back porch and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Where are they?" she snapped. "With Marcus in Boise." The screaming started immediately. She called me a kidnapper, a traitor, and a jealous loser. I let her yell before I said, You left them at my house and told me you would come back when Ava turned 18. That was obviously dramatic, she shouted. I needed a weekend to clear my head. You ignored 17 calls because you were being hostile. Marcus heard her through the glass door and came outside. I gave him the phone. His voice was low and steady. Brianna, the kids are staying with me. Any conversation from now on goes through a lawyer. She tried to soften then. Suddenly she was tired. Suddenly she was overwhelmed. Suddenly it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus did not fall for it. You do not get to abandon them and then rewrite the story, he said. You left them. I am done pretending this is just you having a hard week. Then he hung up. 2 hours later, police officers knocked on the front door. Brianna had actually called them. Grant answered and invited them in. Marcus explained everything. He showed my texts with Brianna, and I showed them my call log with 17 attempts. One officer read the messages twice. He looked at Marcus, then at me. She left them with you and refused to answer? I nodded. He sighed. This is not a kidnapping situation. This is a custody and abandonment situation. The other officer called Brianna from the living room. We could hear her yelling through the phone. He told her that her children were with their legal father, that they were safe, and that if she wanted custody changed, she needed to go through court. When he hung up, he told Marcus to document everything. After they left, the house went quiet. Helen made coffee, no one drank. Ava and Milo were upstairs napping, unaware that adults were downstairs building a legal wall around them. That evening, Marcus found the folder Brianna had packed. It had old daycare forms, expired insurance cards, and no recent medical records. He called the pediatrician listed on one paper and learned Milo had missed multiple checkups. Ava had not been seen in over a year. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his hands over his face. I had seen him angry before. This was different. This was a father realizing the neglect had been deeper than anyone wanted to believe. Brianna was on the porch in sunglasses, even though it was cloudy, banging on the door like she owned the place. Grant opened it halfway. I'm here for my kids, she said. Grant did not move. You can see them when the lawyer approves a supervised visit. They are my children. They were your children when you left them crying on Daniel's doorstep, too. She tried to push past him, but Grant was almost 6'3", so she got nowhere. She screamed about mother's rights and called Marcus a thief. Ava heard the noise from upstairs and started crying. Grant told Brianna to leave before he called police. She stood in the driveway shouting everyone would regret this, then drove away. Rebecca used that incident. She arranged the first supervised visit for the following week with Nolan present. Marcus sounded sick when he told me. He wanted the kids to have a mother, but he also knew Brianna never showed up without turning everything into a performance. She arrived 20 minutes late. Ava stayed behind Marcus's leg. Milo held Helen's hand and would not let go. Brianna crouched down with a fake, bright smile and said, "Come give Mommy a hug." Neither child moved. Ava asked very quietly, "Why did you leave us?" Brianna blinked like she had not prepared for that question. Then she gave some messy answer about needing time to work and how grown-ups sometimes need space. Ava looked at the floor. Milo wandered toward his blocks. For the rest of the visit, Brianna kept trying to make them act happy to see her. She asked if they missed her. She asked if they wanted to come home. When Ava shrugged, Brianna's face changed. She accused Marcus of turning them against her in front of Nolan. Nolan ended the visit early after Brianna snapped at Milo for spilling water. His report was not kind. A week later, Rebecca filed the emergency custody paperwork. Her packet included my statement, the police notes, the medical records, screenshots of Brianna's text, and Nolan's report. She told Marcus, the case was strong because Brianna had abandoned young children and then tried to pretend it was a misunderstanding. Brianna's lawyer sent a letter claiming she had only asked me for temporary childcare. Rebecca answered with the screenshot where Brianna told me to stop being selfish, plus my statement about the 18 years comment. After that, her lawyer got quiet. 2 weeks later, I drove back to Idaho for the emergency hearing. Marcus barely spoke on the way to court. Grant carried a folder thick with documents. Brianna arrived late, wearing a wrinkled black dress. Her lawyer looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Rebecca presented the timeline calmly. She explained how Brianna drove to my house, left the children with almost nothing, ignored every call, and then called police only after learning they were with their father. She submitted Nolan's report. Then the judge asked whether Brianna had said she would come back when Ava turned 8. I had to stand and answer. Yes, I said. Those were her words. She said she would come back when Ava was 18. The judge leaned back. Did she seem to be joking? No. She had their bags packed. She gave me bedtime instructions and pull-up reminders. Then she drove away while they were crying. Brianna shook her head. Her lawyer whispered to her, but she ignored him and asked to speak. The judge warned her to answer questions. She said she was exhausted. She said she was under pressure. She said I misunderstood because I had always judged her. She claimed she only meant for the kids to stay with me for a few days while she prepared for an audition. Rebecca stood with my phone records. If it was only a few days, she asked, why did you ignore 17 calls from the man caring for your children? Brianna stared at the table. Rebecca showed the text where Brianna told me to stop being selfish. Then she showed the medical records. The room changed when the judge read about Milo's missed vaccines and Ava's untreated infection. Marcus testified next. His voice shook, but he kept going. He described the months before he left, how he worked warehouse shifts until midnight while Brianna stayed in the garage rehearsing monologues. He described coming home to cold noodles, diapers overflowing, and both kids still awake because Brianna said crying ruined her focus. Helen was wiping her eyes. The judge granted Marcus emergency temporary custody that morning. He said the children would remain in Boise, in the home where they were already safe, until a full custody hearing. Brianna was allowed supervised visitation only, with Nolan present. Brianna looked shocked, like consequences had been a rumor she never believed in. Outside the courthouse, she cornered me near my car. You destroyed my life, she hissed. No, I said. You handed me your life in 2 backpacks and drove away. Her face twisted. She called me jealous, cruel, and dead to her. Grant stepped between us before she could get closer. Brianna stormed off, shouting she would get the kids back. I drove home that night feeling hollow. Over the next month, Marcus sent me videos almost every day. Ava learned to ride a little scooter in the driveway. Milo started sleeping through the night. Helen took them to Storytime at the library, and Grant built a shelf so they could reach their books. They looked like children again. Brianna's visits told a different story. She arrived late to the first one. During the second, she spent half the time checking her phone. At the third, she got irritated because Milo wanted Marcus to help him with the puzzle instead of sitting on her lap. Nolan's report said Brianna seemed more interested in being adored than in comforting the kids. Then Ava told him she liked living with Daddy. Brianna exploded. She said Marcus had brainwashed her daughter. Ava started crying, and Nolan ended the visit immediately. That report became part of the file. A month after the emergency hearing, Nolan finished his full evaluation and sent it to the court. Marcus forwarded me a copy late on the Thursday night. I read all 17 pages without moving. It was worse than I expected. Nolan documented the medical neglect, the missed vaccines, Ava's infected tooth, and the lack of any regular doctor visits. He described Brianna's rented basement studio apartment in Salem, where the kids had shared a mattress on the floor beside boxes of costumes, ring lights, and unpaid bills. He noted that the kitchen had barely any food when he inspected it. Then came the section about the supervised visits. Brianna did not know Milo's favorite comfort toy. She did not know Ava had started having nightmares. She did not know what time they went to bed now, what they liked for breakfast, or which preschool Marcus was touring for them. Nolan wrote that Brianna treated the visits as a chance to prove she was loved, not a chance to meet the children's needs. The final recommendation was clear. Marcus should keep custody, and Brianna should have only supervised visits until she completed parenting classes, therapy, and maintained steady employment for at least 6 months. I sent the report to my parents. My mother called me 3 hours later, crying. She apologized for doubting me and said she had believed Brianna was overwhelmed, not neglectful. My father got on the line next. He sounded angrier than I had ever heard him. She has spent her whole life stepping out of responsibility and expecting someone else to catch it, he said. This time, she dropped 2 children. After that, my parents called Marcus directly. Mom apologized to him too. Dad offered to testify, if needed, about Brianna's history of quitting jobs, borrowing money, breaking promises, and turning herself into the victim every time. Meanwhile, Brianna made everything worse. She posted a long rant on Facebook about how her family had betrayed her and stolen her babies. She claimed I kidnapped them, Marcus poisoned them against her, and our parents abandoned her when she needed support. At first, a few of her friends commented with hearts and angry emojis. Then Marcus posted the truth. He did not insult her. He simply shared the timeline, the texts, the missed calls, the police visit, and the court's temporary custody order. He included screenshots where Brianna complained that the kids were ruining her audition schedule. He posted proof that she had asked him for money for headshots while Ava needed dental care. The comments changed fast. People started asking Brianna why she left toddlers on a porch. An old roommate wrote that Brianna had vanished 3 days before rent was due. A former theater friend said Brianna once skipped a paid rehearsal because she needed creative silence. Someone else said she borrowed their camera equipment and returned it broken. Brianna deleted her post within hours, but everyone had already seen it. Her next supervised visit was scheduled for Saturday. She arrived 45 minutes late, smelling like cigarette smoke, and carrying a cheap stuffed bear with the price tag still on it. Ava thanked her politely, but did not hug her. Milo hid behind Marcus until Nolan asked if he wanted to sit at the play table. Brianna lasted 18 minutes before snapping. Ava was building a tower while Milo pushed a toy bus around the carpet. Brianna sat beside them, smiling too hard, asking the same questions again. Do you miss Mommy? Don't you want to come home with Mommy? Ava looked at Nolan before answering. I like Daddy's house. That was all it took. Brianna's smile disappeared. She said Marcus had trained Ava to say that. She said everyone had filled the kids' heads with lies. Nolan warned her to lower her voice. She tried for 30 seconds, then started crying loudly, the kind meant to make everyone look at her. Milo covered his ears. Nolan ended the visit immediately. After that, Brianna stopped pretending. She missed the next Saturday because she had an important callback. The Saturday after that, she texted Nolan 10 minutes before the visit and said she was emotionally drained. The third week, she did not show up. Rebecca saved every message and every no-show report. 2 months after Brianna left the kids at my house, Marcus and his parents came to visit me in Portland. When their car pulled up, Ava ran across the walkway wearing a yellow raincoat and shouted my name. Milo followed with both arms out like he expected me to catch him. They were not the same children I had driven to Idaho. Ava talked constantly now. She told me about her preschool tour, her favorite library book, and how Grandpa Grant let her help water the tomatoes. Milo had more words every time I saw him. He pointed at my couch and said, "No juice spill." Everyone laughed. We spent Saturday at a park near my house. Ava climbed the slide by herself. Milo chased pigeons. Marcus sat beside me on a bench, watching them with a look I had never seen on his face before. Peace, maybe. He told me the full custody hearing had been scheduled. I know the evidence is good, he said, but I'm still scared. A few weeks later, I drove back to Boise for the hearing. Rebecca had prepared us for everything. My statement, Marcus's testimony, medical records, Nolan's evaluation, visit reports, and statements from the daycare Brianna used before Marcus left. That last part was new. The daycare director said Brianna was late for pickup so often they started writing it down. Once, she forgot Milo until almost 9 at night. Another time, she dropped Ava off without lunch. The staff kept spare clothes because they knew Brianna would not. In court, Brianna was already there, wearing a borrowed-looking blazer and whispering angrily to her lawyer. The same judge sat at the bench, reading through the file. Rebecca went first. She built the case piece by piece. The porch, the 18-year comment, the ignored calls, the police visit, the medical neglect, the failed visits, the daycare records. She did not need to exaggerate. Then Brianna's lawyer tried to make her sound like a struggling mother who made one bad choice under stress. The judge asked one question. Where was she during the 17 phone calls? The judge asked one question. Where was she during the 17 phone calls? Brianna's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer. He said she had been overwhelmed and needed space. The judge looked at the call log and asked, space from the children she had just abandoned? Then Rebecca called me. I told the story again. The doorbell, the suitcase, Brianna already walking back to her car. I repeated her exact words about coming back when Ava turned 18. I told the judge she did not seem confused, drunk, or panicked. She seemed calm, like she had decided parenting was inconvenient and expected me to accept it. Marcus testified after me. He talked about working double shifts while Brianna spent nights rehearsing for auditions she almost never booked. He described coming home to both kids awake after midnight because she said bedtime broke her creative rhythm. His voice cracked when he said Ava used to ask why Mommy got angry when they needed things. The pediatrician testified next. She explained the missed vaccines, Ava's infected tooth, and Milo's low weight at the first appointment. She said the improvement since Marcus took custody was obvious. The kids were clean, gaining weight, sleeping better, and responding well to routine. Then the daycare director testified. She had records, late pickups, forgotten lunches, missing clothes. One note said staff had waited with Milo until almost 9 because Brianna stopped answering. By the time Brianna took the stand, even her lawyer looked nervous. She said she loved her children and everyone was twisting one mistake into a crime. She blamed Marcus for leaving, me for interfering, and our parents for never believing in her dream. The judge let her talk, then asked how many paid acting jobs she had worked in the last year. Brianna said none. He asked how she planned to support 2 children. She said she was close to a breakthrough. The judge sighed. Children cannot eat potential. The courtroom went silent. At the end, the judge granted Marcus full legal and physical custody. Brianna would only get supervised visitation and only if she completed parenting classes, attended counseling, and held steady employment for 6 months. He said the children needed stability, not promises. Brianna stood before he finished and shouted that this was unfair. Her lawyer pulled her back down. The judge warned her once. She sat red-faced and shaking. Outside, she tried to corner me again, but my father stepped between us. He had flown in the night before. He looked at Brianna and said, "You are not the victim here." She burst into tears, but they sounded angry, not sorry. For the next few weeks, she sent messages from new numbers. I blocked each one. Marcus did the same. Rebecca told us not to answer. Every threat, insult, and excuse went into the file. Meanwhile, Ava and Milo kept getting better. Ava started preschool and came home talking about letters and paints. Milo learned to count to 10 and became obsessed with toy buses. Helen sent photos of them asleep in matching pajamas, faces soft and peaceful. They were safe. That should have been enough for Brianna to change. It was not. 3 months after the full custody order, Brianna had completed 1 parenting class. 1 out of 12. Rebecca found out because the instructor sent attendance records to the court. Brianna showed up to the first session, complained the material was condescending, and never returned. The instructor called twice and emailed 3 times. Brianna ignored all of it. She also lost the part-time job she had picked up at a costume shop. Apparently, she was late almost every shift and missed an entire Saturday because she said she had to protect her creative energy. Her manager fired her after 4 warnings. Marcus did not even sound surprised when he told me. That's who she is, he said. She wants credit for trying without actually trying. The supervised visit monitor tried to schedule visits again. She offered mornings, afternoons, weekends, even short one-hour sessions. Brianna answered none of the emails. Then, out of nowhere, she texted Marcus from a new number. I need $600 for a professional acting reel. This could change everything for me. You owe me after what you did. She did not ask about Ava. She did not ask about Milo. She did not ask if they were healthy, happy, sleeping, eating, learning, anything. Just money. Marcus stared at the screenshot for a long time before forwarding it to Rebecca. Then, he blocked the number. Rebecca said the message was useful. It showed exactly where Brianna's priorities were. 5 months without seeing her children, but she could reach out when she needed cash for another dream she expected someone else to fund. By then, I was driving to Boise once a month. The first weekend of every month became our thing. Ava would run to the door yelling, "Uncle Daniel is here!" and Milo would crash into my legs like a tiny football player. Their lives had become beautifully ordinary. Preschool, library mornings, park afternoons, pancakes on Sundays, dentist appointments that actually happened, doctor checkups written on a calendar in thick blue marker, bedtime stories every night. Ava could write her name now. Milo could count to 10 if nobody rushed him. They had favorite cups, favorite pajamas, favorite bedtime books. Little things. Normal things. Things Brianna had treated like obstacles. One Saturday, Ava showed me a drawing she made at preschool. It had 5 stick figures: Daddy, Grandma, Grandpa, Milo, and me. Everyone was standing under a yellow sun. There was no Brianna. I looked at Marcus. He saw it too. He did not smile. He looked sad for a moment, then relieved. That night, after the kids were asleep, we sat on the back porch while Grant cleaned up toys in the yard. Marcus said he had been thinking about making it permanent. Not just custody, he said. I mean, legally permanent. I don't want her disappearing for a year and then walking back in when she gets bored. I knew what he meant. Termination of parental rights. It sounded harsh until I thought about Ava crying in my hallway, Milo's tiny suitcase, Brianna ignoring 17 calls, and that text asking for money, but not once asking about her children. I said, I think it's time. Rebecca agreed. She filed the petition based on abandonment, neglect, failure to comply with court requirements, and lack of meaningful contact. When Brianna was served, she finally reacted. Brianna called Marcus from 3 different numbers in 1 hour. He did not answer. Then she tried me from an unknown number, leaving voicemails about how Marcus could not erase her, how a mother is a mother forever, and how everyone had gone too far. Rebecca told us not to respond. The termination hearing was set for Thursday morning in Boise. I drove in the night before and stayed in Marcus's parents' guest room. Nobody slept much. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the same folder in front of him until Helen gently took it away. "You know the truth," she said. "Let the judge see it." At court, Brianna arrived on time for once. She wore a navy blazer with the tag still tucked under one sleeve, like she was playing the role of a responsible adult. Her new lawyer looked serious but tired. The same judge opened the file. Rebecca laid everything out without drama. The porch, the children's bags, the 18-year comment, the 17 ignored calls, the emergency order, the missed classes, the lost job, the unanswered emails from the visit monitor, the months without seeing Ava and Milo, the text asking Marcus for money for an acting reel without one question about the children. Then she added the medical records, Nolan's evaluation, preschool letters, and photos of Marcus's fridge calendar, every appointment written in marker. Brianna's lawyer argued that she had made mistakes but deserved time. He said she was overwhelmed and ready to change. The judge asked, "What has she done to show that?" The lawyer paused. "She attended 1 parenting class." "1 out of 12? The judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Brianna. "How many supervised visits have you attended in the last 3 months?" Brianna whispered, "None." He asked why. She said the times never worked and she did not feel safe around people who hated her. Then the judge asked when Ava's birthday was. Brianna got the day wrong. He asked what Milo's favorite comfort item was. She guessed a blanket. It was his stuffed dinosaur, the same one he had dropped on my sidewalk the day she left him. Marcus lowered his head. Helen covered her mouth. The judge took off his glasses. Miss Keller, this court gave you a path. Parenting classes, counseling, employment, supervised visits, basic contact with your children. You chose not to walk it. Brianna cried and said she loved them. She said she was their mother. She said nobody understood her life. The judge's voice stayed calm. Love without action is not care. These children need permanence. Then he granted the petition. Brianna's parental rights to Ava and Milo were terminated. Marcus was given sole, permanent legal custody. For a moment, Brianna just stared. Then she stood up screaming that we had stolen her babies. The bailiff moved toward her, and her lawyer pulled her back, whispering for her to stop. She did not stop. She screamed until they escorted her into the hallway. Inside the courtroom, everything went still. Marcus held the signed order in both hands. Grant put a hand on his shoulder. Helen cried silently. Rebecca leaned over and said, "It's done. They're safe." That evening, Ava and Milo were coloring at the kitchen table. Ava looked up and asked if Daddy was okay. Marcus knelt beside her and hugged both kids. "Yeah," he said softly. "Daddy's okay now." And for the first time since my doorbell rang that Friday, I believed all of us were safe. Brianna once told me she would come back for them when Ava turned 18. The court made sure she never got that chance. 3 weeks after the hearing, I drove to Boise for my usual weekend visit. The house felt different when I walked in. Not louder or quieter, just lighter. The kids were building a blanket fort in the living room, and Marcus was on the floor with them, pretending not to know how doors worked. Ava ran out and threw herself at me. "You have to knock before you come in," she said, very serious. So I knocked on a pillow taped to a chair, and Milo shouted, "Come in, Uncle Daniel." That was their world now. Pillow doors, bedtime stories, pancakes shaped like bears, and a father who checked the weather before packing jackets. Nobody was waiting for Brianna anymore. Nobody jumped when a phone rang. Marcus kept the custody order in a drawer, but he did not look at it every day like he used to. Helen said he had started sleeping through the night. Grant said the kids had turned the house upside down in the best possible way. A month later, Brianna tried to appeal. Rebecca had warned us it might happen. The paperwork was sloppy, but it still had to be answered. Brianna claimed the court had misunderstood her, that she had been punished for being creative, and that Marcus's family used money to steal her children. The appeal went nowhere. The judge reviewed the record and denied it. There had been too many missed visits, ignored emails, and chances she refused to take. Brianna had been given a path back to Ava and Milo, and she had chosen excuses instead. After that, she disappeared. No calls, no apologies, no posts. Just silence. I thought silence would feel peaceful. Mostly it did. But sometimes I wondered how someone could walk away from 2 kids who still found magic in soap bubbles and cereal boxes. Then I remembered the porch, the rain, the tiny suitcase, and Ava asking why Mommy left. That question answered everything. 6 months after the first day, Marcus invited everyone to Ava's preschool show. My parents flew in. Helen made too much food. Grant filmed the whole thing, even though Ava only had 2 lines and 1 song. Milo clapped at the wrong times and yelled, "That's my sister," so loudly half the room laughed. Afterward, we took photos outside the school. Ava held a paper flower she had made. My mother cried again, but this time it was different. Not guilt, relief. On the drive home, Ava asked if I would still visit every month. I told her yes. "Even when I'm big?" she asked. "Even then." She nodded like we had signed a serious contract. That night, after the kids went to bed, Marcus and I sat on the porch. The yard was full of toys, chalk marks, and 1 abandoned rain boot. He looked at all of it and said, "I used to think saving them meant winning a case." I asked what he thought now. He smiled a little. "It means showing up tomorrow." I knew he was right. Brianna made one selfish choice and expected everyone else to carry it. But children are not a burden you hand off when life gets inconvenient. They are people. They remember who leaves and who stays. And Ava and Milo would grow up knowing exactly who stayed. A year after Brianna left the kids on my porch, Marcus threw a backyard birthday party for Milo. There were paper lanterns tied to the fence, a plastic dinosaur cake on the picnic table, and more children running around than I could count. Milo wore a green party hat and kept shouting that he was 3 now, like the whole neighborhood needed to understand the importance of it. Ava followed him everywhere with a juice box in one hand and a clipboard Helen had made for her. She said she was in charge of party safety, which mostly meant telling people not to step on balloons. My parents came. Helen and Grant invited half the street. Marcus stood by the grill flipping burgers with one eye on the kids and the other on the cake melting in the sun. It looked normal. That was the part that hit me hardest. No courtroom, no police reports, no lawyers calling, no emergency bags packed by the door. Just a little boy laughing because his grandfather was pretending to be chased by a stuffed animal. After the candles, Ava asked if I could help her carry a plate of cake to the porch. When we sat down, she looked at the yard and said, "Mommy doesn't come anymore." I went very still. "No," I said carefully. "She doesn't." Ava poked at her frosting and said, "Daddy says grown-ups has to make good choices." "That's true." "She made bad ones?" I thought about lying in some soft adult way, but Ava had already lived through the truth. "Yes, she made choices that hurt you and Milo." Ava nodded. She did not cry. She just looked back at Marcus, who was kneeling to wipe cake off Milo's face. "Daddy stayed," she said. "Yeah," I said. "He stayed." "So did you." That one got me. I had spent so much time telling myself I only did the obvious thing. I called their father. I drove them where they needed to go. I testified when I had to. But to Ava, that had become part of her story. I was one of the people who stayed. Later that evening, after the guests left and the yard was littered with paper plates and popped balloons, Marcus and I cleaned up while Grant carried sleeping Milo inside. Ava had passed out on the couch with her shoes still on. Marcus picked up a crushed party hat and smiled. "I got a letter from Brianna," he said. My stomach tightened. "What does she want?" "Nothing useful." He pulled an envelope from his back pocket. He had already opened it. The letter was 3 pages of excuses. Brianna said she was misunderstood. She said the system punished women. She said someday the kids would realize she had loved them in her own way. Near the end, she wrote that she was moving to Los Angeles because Portland had too many bad memories and not enough opportunities. She did not ask to see Ava. She did not ask to see Milo. She did not include a birthday card. Marcus folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. "I'm not keeping it, but I wanted you to know." He dropped it into the trash bag with the paper plates and broken streamers. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then Milo yelled from upstairs that he needed his dinosaur, and Marcus immediately went inside. That was the difference between them. Brianna always had a dream waiting somewhere else. Marcus had 2 children calling from the next room, and he answered every time. The next few months were quiet in a way I had forgotten quiet could be. Not empty quiet. This was the quiet that comes after a storm has moved on. Marcus sent me photos almost every day. Ava asleep with a book open on her chest, Milo wearing rain boots on the wrong feet, Grant teaching them how to plant carrots. Brianna posted ones from Los Angeles. A blurry photo of a studio hallway with the caption, "Starting over where people understand ambition." Nobody in the family commented. 2 weeks later, my mother called and told me Brianna had asked her for money, not for rent, not for food, for acting workshops. Mom said no. For the first time in my life, she said no and meant it. She told me I was choosing Marcus over my own daughter, Mom said. What did you say? I told her I was choosing the children she left behind. There was a silence after that, but it was not sad. It felt like a door closing. By winter, Ava and Milo had routines so solid you could set a clock by them. Breakfast at 7, preschool bags by the door at 8, library on Tuesdays, pancakes on Saturdays, movie night on Fridays. Marcus became the parent who carried snacks, mittens, wipes, and crayons. One Friday evening, I arrived in Boise during the first snowfall. Ava met me at the door holding a drawing. It showed a blue house, 4 people and 1 stick figure beside a car. "That's you visiting," she explained. Milo pointed at the picture and said, "Uncle comes back." I smiled, but my throat tightened. Always. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus told me he had started paperwork to legally change their last names to his. They already used it at preschool. Ava had asked why her cubby had a different name from Daddy's. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think they already know where they belong." The hearing for the name change was nothing like the custody hearings. No screaming, no accusations, just a small room, a judge, and 2 children coloring at a table while adults signed papers. Brianna was notified. She did not respond. When the judge approved it, Ava practiced writing her new full name on the back of the order. The letters were uneven and huge. Milo drew circles. Marcus kept that paper on the fridge. A year and a half after the porch, I visited for Christmas. The house was glowing with lights. Milo had a toy train under the tree, and Ava was arranging cookies for Santa, even though she had questions about him. During dinner, my father raised his glass. "To the people who show up," he said. Nobody needed him to explain. Marcus looked at Ava and Milo, then at me, and nodded. I thought about Brianna, somewhere in California, still chasing applause from strangers while the 2 best parts of her life built forts in Idaho without her. For a long time, I had been angry enough to want her punished. Now, I understood the real consequence. Life kept going. The children kept growing. And she was no longer part of the story they told when they said the word family. 2 years after everything happened, Ava had a school project about family. The assignment was simple. Draw your family tree and explain one person who helped you grow. Marcus sent me a photo of it before I even knew the project existed. At the top, Ava had drawn herself and Milo holding hands. Under them were Marcus, Helen, Grant, my parents, and me. She had written everyone's names in big, uneven letters. Beside my name, she wrote, "He drove us to Daddy when we were scared." I sat in my apartment staring at the picture for a long time. That drive had been one of the worst nights of my life. I remembered the gas station bathroom, Milo crying until he threw up, Ava asking every 20 minutes if her mother was coming. I remembered gripping the steering wheel, terrified I was making the wrong decision. To Ava, it had become something else. It was the night someone chose her. A week later, I visited Boise for Ava's school presentation. She stood at the front of the classroom with her paper in both hands while Marcus filmed from the back. She was nervous, but she read every word. "My family is the people who take care of me. My daddy makes breakfast, Grandma reads stories, Grandpa fixes things. Uncle Daniel visits every month. Milo is my brother and he steals my crayons." Everyone laughed at that part. Then she said, "Some people are family because they stay." Marcus wiped his eyes before the video ended. After the presentation, we went for ice cream. Milo got chocolate all over his shirt within 5 minutes. Ava told me she wanted to be a teacher, a veterinarian, and maybe a detective. Marcus said she could be all 3 if she figured out the schedule. That evening, I helped Marcus put the kids to bed. Milo fell asleep halfway through a dinosaur book. Ava stayed awake longer, tracing shapes on her blanket. "Do you think she remembers us?" she asked suddenly. I did not need to ask who she meant. "I think she remembers," I said carefully. Ava thought about that. "Then why doesn't she say sorry?" There are questions children ask that adults cannot make pretty. "Some people don't know how to be sorry in a way that changes anything," I said. Ava nodded slowly, like she was filing that away. "I'm glad Daddy came," she whispered. "So am I." "And you." I smiled. "Me too." Downstairs, Marcus was standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with 2 mugs of tea. Neither of us really liked tea, but somehow we always made it when life felt too big. "She asked about Brianna," he said. I nodded. He looked toward the stairs. "I hate that she still has to carry any of that." "She's carrying less than she would have." Marcus breathed out. "Yeah." Outside, snow had started falling again. The backyard was quiet except for the wind moving the swing set. Grant had built it the first summer the kids came home. It looks smaller now because Ava and Milo were growing so fast. That was the strange part about consequences. Brianna thought consequences meant losing a court case, losing custody, losing the right to call herself their mother on paper. But the real consequence was quieter than that. It was every birthday she missed, every school photo she never received, every new word Milo learned without her. Every night, Ava fell asleep feeling safe somewhere else. Brianna once believed she could put motherhood down like a heavy bag and pick it back up when it was convenient. But children do not pause their lives for the people who leave. They grow around the empty space. And eventually, that space stops being empty. It becomes filled with people who stayed. 3 years after Brianna left Ava and Milo on my porch, I stopped thinking of that day as the day our family broke. It was the day the truth finally became impossible to ignore. Ava was 7 now. Milo was 5. They were taller, louder, funnier, and so far removed from the scared children I had found outside my door that sometimes it felt like remembering a nightmare from someone else's life. Marcus had moved into a house 2 streets away from Helen and Grant. Not because he needed their help every minute anymore, but because the kids loved running between both homes like the whole neighborhood belonged to them. Grant built a little gate in the fence. Helen called it the Grandkid Highway. I still drove to Boise every month. One Saturday in spring, I arrived to find Ava on the porch with a notebook in her lap. Milo was in the yard digging a hole for reasons nobody fully understood. Ava looked up and said, "I'm writing a story." "What's it about?" "A girl who gets lost but finds the right house." I sat beside her, careful not to react too much. "Does she get home?" Ava thought for a second. "No, she gets a better home." Milo ran past us with a plastic shovel and yelled, "There's treasure!" Then he tripped, got up, and kept running like nothing had happened. Ava watched him and smiled. That was when I realized they were not just surviving anymore. They were not healing every second. They were not waiting for the next disaster. They were simply living. Later that afternoon, Marcus and I stood by the fence while the kids chased bubbles across the grass. He told me Brianna had emailed him again. It was short, no apology, no real interest, just a line about how she hoped the kids would understand someday that she had to choose herself. Marcus deleted it. He did not forward it to Rebecca. He did not call me angry. He did not spend the night pacing. He just deleted it. "That felt good," he said. I looked at Ava, laughing so hard she fell into the grass. Milo dropped beside her just because she did. "She doesn't get to pull you back anymore," I said. Marcus nodded. "No, she doesn't." That evening, we had dinner outside. Helen made too much food, like always. Grant told the same fishing story he had told 100 times. My parents were visiting too, and my dad helped Milo cut his corn while my mom braided Ava's hair. At one point, Ava looked around the table and said, "This is a lot of family." Everyone went quiet for half a second. Then Grant raised his glass and said, "Good, you deserve extra." Ava grinned like that made perfect sense. After dinner, Milo fell asleep on the couch with one shoe still on. Ava leaned against Marcus while he read to her, her eyes half closed. I stood in the doorway and watched them, not because anything dramatic was happening, but because nothing dramatic was happening. No one was leaving, no one was shouting, no one was making children feel like they were in the way. Just a father reading a book, a little girl fighting sleep, and a little boy safe enough to dream with chocolate on his face. When I drove home the next morning, Ava hugged me at the door. "You'll come back next month?" "Always." Milo wrapped both arms around my leg. "Uncle comes back." I laughed. Uncle always comes back. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Marcus stood on the porch with Ava on one side and Milo on the other. Helen and Grant were behind them. My parents were waving from the steps. For years, Brianna had treated family like a safety net she could tear apart and still expect to catch her. She believed love meant people would keep forgiving her, keep paying for her, keep cleaning up the wreckage she left behind. But love is not letting someone abandon children and call it a dream. Love is opening the door when they are scared. Love is driving through the night when you are terrified. Love is showing up in court, at school plays, at doctor appointments, at birthdays, at bedtime. Love is not a speech. It is proof. Brianna once told me she would come back when Ava turned 18, But by then, Ava and Milo would not be waiting. They would be grown in a home full of people who chose them every single day. And that was the consequence Brianna never understood. When you walk away from your children, the world does not stop until you return. Someone better steps in. Someone stays. And eventually, the door you slammed behind you locks from the inside.